conventions of your variables. Your variables should always start with a lowercase letter, and if the name of your variable consists of more than one word, each consecutive word should start with uppercase letter. This makes your code more readable and maintainable. As you can see here from our previous lectures, when I created the string variable, I used my with lowercase letter and the name word started with a capital letter. Some other examples, for example, we can change the circumference to the circumference. So the circumference like this, or with the area, so the area like this. Or we can change this to something with more words. For a better example, area of the circle. As you can see, again, my first word is all lowercase letters, lowercase characters, and each consecutive word starts with a capital letter. This makes it much more readable, as opposed to area of the circle. This looks like one giant word, and it's not readable. There are more naming conventions that we will discuss in the following lectures about different parts of your code, like iterators in loops and functions. They have a bit different conventions, but we will talk about that when we get to it. Before we end, I want to talk about spacing. As you can see, when I write my variables, I am using one single white space on both sides of my assigning operator, like here and here. You can see this with all my variables. You can also see it in my equations. I am using free spaces on both sides of my multiplication operator. You should always do this. This greatly increases the readability of your code, and it is also good to use free rows to separate different sections of your code. For example, in our code with the equations, it is good to separate our variables from our equations. It makes it much more readable. In this case, now let's abstract us away from this other code. In this case, we can stick the circumference and the area together because they are very similar to each other. They are both equations, they are both concerned about the circle and the radius, but the radius is a variable. It only has one value in it. So I would write it like this. I would put the equations together and the variables separated. If the variables are too different, of different types, I may also separate them as well. And we will see this when we start working on bigger scripts where we have more variables, more equations, more functions. And to better illustrate this, I want to show you an example. Now, take a look at this code. This is a file that I have written a few years ago, and I have purposely deleted all of the spaces from the right version of the file, and I have all spaces correctly placed in the left version of the file. You may not understand this code, but just take a moment and look at it. I'm going to show you a bit more from the code, so let's go down here. Let's go down here, like this, and maybe down here. So you may not understand it, as I said, but think about it. Which one looks more readable, more understandable? For me, it's obvious which is more readable and which one is more pleasant for my eyes. When you don't have spaces in your code, when you don't have them correctly placed in your code, you can easily get lost. Well, you will understand what I'm talking about when you start coding, but it's much easier to just use the spaces because it makes your code more readable. That's everything there is to it. Readability. It doesn't change the functionality of your code. It will not make your code misbehave or something like this, but it will make it more readable, more maintainable, and you will be able to understand it more easily.